Hey, what's up people? This is Zara from Kingdom 2115 and in this video we'll talk about critical hits and anti-crit rates. So in order to understand things clearly, I have created a few notes. So let's go through them one by one. We will start with the definition of critical hits. So it simply means the ability to deal 300% damage. That is triple damage you will be dealing to the enemy troops if the attack is a critical hit. Now we have another attribute known as critical damage, and this is the additional damage if the strike is a critical hit. So let's try to understand this with the help of an example. Let's say if I am an infantry player and I have a crit rate of 50% and my infantry crit damage is 300%. So what will happen in that case? There is a chance that half of my hits will deal 600% damage to the enemy troops. So 600, because the ability to deal critical damage means you will be dealing triple damage by default, and since you have this additional buff of 300%, so the total sum is 600%. So this is how critical hits work. If it is a critical hit, you will be dealing triple damage or more based on what stats you have to the enemy troops. Very easy. Now let's talk about the counter of this critical hit, which is anti-crit. First of all, please note that unlike critical hit, anti-crit is not a chance. So it doesn't mean that it will get triggered if you have a higher rate. No matter what value you have, anti-crit will always work, because the job of the anti-crit is to reduce the crit triggering probability of the opponent troop. So suppose if my opponent has a crit triggering probability of 50% and your anti-crit is 50%, this means his crit will never get activated. It doesn't mean that you have a probability of triggering your crit damage reduction. No, that is wrong. Now, if we talk about crit damage reduction, it means reduce the effect of critical damage received from the enemy. Very simple definition, don't get confused here. Let's try to understand this with the help of an example. Suppose if I have an infantry anti-crit of 15% and my infantry crit damage reduction is 300%. It will simply mean that every time if enemy infantry attacks me, please note this, I am talking about enemy infantry because I have an infantry anti-crit rate. So it will reduce the critical hit triggering probability of only infantry players and not archer or cavalry. So coming back to the example, every time if the enemy infantry attacks me, his critical hit chance is reduced by 15%. So whatever his critical hit triggering probability is, it will get reduced by 15%. And let's say his crit rate is very high, even though I am trying to reduce it by 15%, still his critical hit is getting activated and he is dealing me critical damage. So in that scenario, if he is able to deal a critical hit, the critical damage received by me will be reduced by 300% because I have an infantry crit damage reduction of 300%. So my infantry crit damage reduction is independent of anti-crit. Anti-crit will reduce the crit triggering probability of the enemy troop, and suppose if still he is able to do a critical hit, the amount of critical damage received by me will be reduced because of this attribute, which is known as crit damage reduction. Clear? I think we still might have some confusion here, so let us try to understand this scenario with another example. So let us talk about this example number 1, where opponent is attacking me with an infantry, and for the sake of understanding, let us suppose that enemy stats are infantry crit rate of 75% and his crit damage is 300%, and my stats are infantry anti-crit of 25 and infantry crit damage reduction of 400%. So the result would be that the chance of enemy infantry dealing a critical hit is reduced from 1/3 to 1/2. If I didn't have these stats, there was a chance of 75% of him dealing a critical hit. But since I have an infantry anti-crit of 25, so the chance of him dealing a critical hit is reduced to 50%. And let's say 50% is still very good and he will definitely deal critical hits to me. And since he has a critical infantry crit damage of 300%, by default 300, additional 300, so he can deal me 6 times the damage. But since my infantry crit damage reduction is 400%, so overall damage received by me would be 200%. 300 default which enemy has, 300 with the help of buffs, minus 400 which is my stat, So the resultant critical damage that I will get from enemy if his hit is a critical hit is 200% only. So this was example 1. Let us also go with example 2, which will give you a few more clarity. So we are taking the same example. Enemy has the same stats and he is attacking me with infantry, but this time my infantry anti-crit is 0 and my infantry crit damage reduction is 0. However, I have an archer anti-crit of 30% and archer crit damage reduction of 400%. Number one confusion the people have, that since my infantry anti-crit and damage reduction is very less, if he attacks me with infantry, my infantry will get a lot of damage, but my archer will get lesser damage. This is not so true, because the chances of enemy infantry dealing a critical hit is always going to be 75%, no matter if it is your infantry or archer, because your infantry anti-crit is 0, right? And whenever he deals a critical damage, you will not be able to reduce his critical damage because your infantry critical damage reduction is 0, no matter what your archer anti-crit and crit damage reductions are. This stat can only weaken the enemy archer properties and not the infantry. The opponent is attacking me with infantry. I have good archer anti-crits, but my archer anti-crits are waste if he is attacking me with infantry. So what conclusion we have here? For attacking, we need to have a critical hit and critical damage of the troops we usually attack with. For example, I am a cavalry player. If I have a cavalry crit rate and critical damage, good for me. But when I am defending, I need to have anti-crit and crit damage reductions of all the troops. So I hope this clears your doubt. If you still have some questions, drop them in the comments. I will try to answer them. See you in the next video. Till then, have a nice day.